This is continuing WSB coverage of the Ross Harris trial from WSB Radio, Channel 2 Action News, and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The Cobb County hot car death trial that shocked the nation is now being tried. Your host for this hour is WSB's Mark Aram.
Welcome to the program, a special broadcast on News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB, also streaming live on WSBradio.com and the WSB Radio app. Day one of the Ross Harris trial. Jury selection started today in Cobb County. Joining me today on the program, WSB legal expert Ron Carlson, WSB legal reporter Veronica Waters, who's covered some of the most notorious and impactful Atlanta trials in the last 2 decades, and Channel 2 Action News Cobb County Bureau Chief Ross Cavett. Let's start first with Veronica, who was in the courtroom today. Jury selection, did it go as expected? What happened today, Veronica?
Well, I guess we knew what was going to be expected. If you heard my morning reports, I said this is what's known as the crying day. So this is when the folks who have notified the court that there's a hardship will come in and say, Judge, I really can't do it because X, Y, and Z. So that went as scheduled, and I think as many of us anticipated, most of those people were not released from the jury pool. Now you may have seen reports that 550 summonses were sent out for this case. It's actually 550 for all 8 trials, which are starting this week, but there are 370 people in the jury pool for this Justin Ross Harris case, so they are really hopeful that they can use that number of people to find an impartial jury.
WSB TV's Ross Cavett joins us now live via the phone. Ross, how many jurors got voir dire today or were seen in front of the judge and the lawyers?
Hey, Mark. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, it was 11 jurors that wanted to be relieved of their duty, so to speak, get out of serving jury duty. If we learn one thing, well, actually, we learned 2 things today. One is don't ignore your jury summons and don't think you're going to get out of it just because it's going to impact your business in some way. That's just not going to fly with the judge. And secondly, we also learned a lot today. Even though there are only 11 jurors that came before the judge, and as Veronica mentioned, 2 of them got excused, gave us a good idea what we're looking at as far as the timeline goes. A couple of those jurors had trips scheduled for this upcoming weekend, problems just a few days in advance. So the judge essentially said, all right, we'll let you go off on your trip. You come back in the middle of next week, and we'll see you then. So any dreams we had of having a jury selected in the first week here certainly are out the window. The judge is planning on this going at least through next week, it sounds like.
Just to clarify, Ross, 11 jurors were excused or only 11 jurors went in front of the judge today?
No, only 11 jurors went in front of the judge. 2 were excused. One guy had a 40th wedding anniversary coming up with his wife, and back in November, before he got the jury summons, they put down a large sum of cash on a trip to Paris. So the judge and lawyers felt obviously sympathy for him, so he was let go. And the second person, they didn't really clarify, but that second person who was released is somewhere out at sea and not available to come to Marietta.
WSB senior legal expert Ron Carlson joins us for just a second. Ron, only 11 jurors in front of the judge day one. That seems painfully slow of a process, no?
Well, it's wonderful that only 11 wanted to be excused. Now, some of the traditional excuses that are posed on it, Mark, are physical or mental illness on the part of the individual. There's one Georgia case where a person with a heart condition was excused. It's not a good excuse that the dog ate my jury summons. Most jurors would not even try that because they understand that jury duty is important and a right and duty in a democracy. Unfortunately, it's sometimes the case, doesn't appear to be so here, but sometimes the case that our most qualified citizens ask to be excused.
So here's the thing. I think I want to jump in and say, let me reassure you that this may be a little lengthy process, but we didn't go through 11 jurors in an 8-hour day. This whole thing took probably about an hour to take place. So they were in and out pretty quickly. They came to the courtroom because there were only 11 who wrote the court and said, I can't do it.
So these were the 11 that were looking to get excused. This wasn't
correct.
So that yes. clarifies things. So this wasn't all 300 people show up with jury duty this one day. There was only 11 people scheduled to show up.
Correct. That is absolutely correct. And they went through them pretty quickly. Now, tomorrow, the hundreds of jurors will come and they'll fill out these lengthy questionnaires, which are going to be at least 17 pages long, I'm told.
Yeah, and I don't think I've seen that many jurors in the Cobb County courtroom at one time, so it's going to be interesting to see how they get them all in and get them all sworn and get them working on these jury questionnaires because that's a lot of jurors.
Ross, you set up camp in Cobb County. I see the Channel 2 news truck there on the 120 loop every time I drive by. You're very familiar with the Cobb County jury. How long do you think it will take to actually seat a jury, or will we ever seat a jury in this trial?
Well, this is really interesting to me because I remember another high-profile case we covered in Cobb in the mid-2000s, Lynn Turner, who poisoned her husband and boyfriend, killed them both. And we brought in a large group of jurors to the room, and Judge Jim Bodiford, who was the judge at the time, essentially asked them, how many of you have heard what you consider a substantial amount of information on this case? And about 90% raised their hands. And pretty much at that point, we were moving the trial out of Cobb County. You can't do that anymore now. The way we consume information these days, everybody's going to have heard something about this case. I mean, you've really got to be sequestering yourself off under some big old rock somewhere not to have heard of the Ross Harris case. So in this case, they're going to, Veronica mentioned, a 17-page questionnaire these jurors are going to have to go through, and answering all sorts of questions about their personal lifestyle and their beliefs and how much they've heard about this case and where they've heard it from. And you're not going to be able to disqualify a jury just because they know a lot about this case. They will have to have formed some sort of rock-solid opinion that they can't be impartial before they're excused. And they're obviously going to go a long way in trying to find these jurors, maybe, like I said, the first 2 weeks at least, and keep on going.
You're listening to a special broadcast on News 95.5 at AM 750 WSB, covering the first day of the Ross Harris trial via the stream on the WSB radio app, and online. You can watch it as well at WSBradio.com. WSB senior legal expert Ron Carlson joins us. Ron, question for you. Obviously, there were 11 people trying to get off this jury. If I were a Cobb County resident, I would want to be on this jury. Do we expect to see people that are dying to be on this jury?
Absolutely. There will be a large number of citizens, many motivated by the public duty that I mentioned. Now, Ross and Veronica mentioned these jury questionnaires, Mark. They're going to be completed by the jurors on Tuesday. That'll be their homework. Some court clerks' offices send these out for return fully 2 weeks or so before a big trial, so in part the lawyers can study the responses. There seems to be some trust in Cobb that the experienced lawyers in the case, and we've got good lawyers on both sides, can absorb this stuff on the fly, that they are quick studies.
Well, this, again, all my legal knowledge pretty much comes from the movies, Ron. Are we entering the stage of the jury selection where the defense attorney gets to question these jurors and grill them and then say, he's no good, he's out of here, or this one's acceptable? Is that what's about to start right now?
That's about to start, and you're right, Mark. This process starts to get interesting when the lawyers question face-to-face the jurors and try to get into the heads of the jurors. They want jurors that are sympathetic to their side. That's part of the adversary process. And, Mark, this questioning can be very wide-ranging. In a murder case, it can go all the way from the bumper stickers a juror has on his car, TV shows they watch. I expect there will be questions about where they live in Cobb and whether they're familiar with the Home Depot office and the roads around it.
This might vary jurisdiction by jurisdiction, Ron, but do the defense and the prosecution have a certain number of he's out of here cards or that they can play?
They sure do. There'll be two kinds of challenges that we'll see in this case, Mark. First of all, there'll be challenges for cause. That means that the juror has formed a fixed opinion about the case, either for the prosecution or for the defense. That disqualifies the juror. And then later, there will be peremptory strikes. Now, the lawyers have, those are wild cards. The lawyers can play those as they wish. If, for example, they don't like the way a juror combs his hair, they don't have to explain those to anybody. The challenges for cause, they do.
And is there a fixed number, Ron, or...
Yes, in a felony, 9 per side.
Interesting. WSB's Veronica Waters, you were at the courtroom today. For the folks that are just joining us, getting their car driving home, what was the scene like? Was it just a normal day at the Cobb County Court, or was it just a bunch of media, a bunch of people, anything, any protesters, anything like that?
There were far more media types there than anybody else, I think, connected to this actual case. For example, I was talking with one of the network guys. He said there were literally 14 people there. I mean, I stopped counting at 14 for all the different shows, and that's just one station. But that's because we were all trying to get in and get plugged in and get set up, so we'll have the audio and video feeds that we need. Tomorrow, I think it's going to be a madhouse. You think about 370 people called to the courthouse to fill out questionnaires. It is going to be a jumble of folks in there.
Ross Cabot from Channel 2 Action News. Ross, I'm assuming that Ross Harris was not there today and probably won't be until this jury selection is over, correct?
No, he was in the courtroom today. He's allowed, and in fact, he needs really a special excuse not to be in the courtroom today for all these kind of proceedings. So he was there. He was wearing a nice Oxford shirt and a red tie. It was late last year. His attorneys filed a motion that he no longer appear in court in jail clothes. So they've had him dressed up for the last couple of court appearances now, and that's the way it's going to be during the trial. He'll probably be wearing a suit during the trial. And again, he talks to his lawyers frequently. He looks like he's well engaged in his defense. And I assume he will be throughout the trial. Of course, everybody wants to know if he's going to take the witness stand or not, even though most consider that highly unlikely. It'll be interesting to see how this trial plays out and what he eventually does.
That's interesting. I had no idea that Ross would have been there for jury selection. Did he have any supporters with him today, Ross? Any family members or anything like that?
No, like Veronica said, it was hard to pick out anybody other than media that was in the courtroom today. You have all these, network shows and crime shows and stuff that are in there. It looked like that was the majority of the folks in the courtroom today. There were a couple others I couldn't readily identify, but didn't recognize them immediately as being supporters on either side.
As the Cobb County Bureau Chief for WSB Television, is this the main topic of conversation in the Waffle Houses and the biscuit joints?
I think it is. I think it's died out somewhat, and everybody's been kind of waiting for this trial to start. And interesting to see, the big topic of conversation that I engaged in today, just walking down the sidewalk with several people, is will they be able to find an impartial jury here in Cobb County? Most don't think they are, but they will be able to. But again, I think the bar has somewhat changed as far as what constitutes an impartial jury anymore, given the way we consume media these days. And I hold out hope that they will. I think they'll certainly, Judge Mary Staley will push this pretty far. She'll go through all 300 and some plus jurors and question them really hard and push the lawyers to find an impartial jury here in Cobb County, because that's the way certainly she wants to go. And another alternative would be to bring in jurors from another jurisdiction, but the question is, where do you go to find somebody who hasn't heard of this case?
Channel 2's Ross Cabot. I am Mark Aram. Veronica Waters alongside me, and WSB senior legal expert Ron Carlson. Will they be able to find a suitable jury in Cobb County? We'll discuss that when we come back. If you have any questions for any of our guests, you can tweet them at me at Mark Aram, MarkArum. The Ross Harris trial, a special presentation of News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB.